This series is going to be a little bit different than what a lot of our series are. It's going to seem a little bit dark at times, but that's real life, right? There are some challenges, there are difficulties that we find ourselves in, and this is true of the book that we're going to be going through, found in the Old Testament, based off of the prophet Habakkuk. Okay, that's where this teaching comes from, the book of Habakkuk. It's a small book, 3 chapters in the Old Testament. Everybody say Habakkuk. Sounded like you just coughed up a fur ball or something, you know. That's the name of the prophet that God would speak to in the Old Testament. Throughout Scripture, you find different prophets that God would speak through to the people, to the nation of Israel, to God's people. A prophet is simply someone who would speak to the people on behalf of God. Now, Habakkuk is a little bit different in that Habakkuk spoke to God on behalf of the people. At least that's what we see in the book of Habakkuk. Habakkuk speaking to God because of what's going on with the people. Now, we don't know a whole lot about Habakkuk, but we do know a little bit. He lived about 600 years before the time of Jesus, okay? And during this time, the nation of Judah was really on a downhill slant, really turning away from the things of God, kind of doing their own thing, living their own way, and had kind of rebelled against everything that God had done for them and God had taught them, and the principles that kind of directed them for so long. And they're turning away from those things and really living apart from the blessing of God. And because of this, there is a lot of really rough things that are going on, some bad things that are happening, and Habakkuk is crying out to God because of this, and asking God, why is this going on? They went from prosperity to really being a very impoverished nation. There's a lot of injustice and corruption and violence that is going on, and that's kind of the setting where we see Habakkuk come on the scene and begin to talk to God. He is really beside himself because he loves the people of God. He knows God loves his people. But he's confused, he's perplexed, he's really just struggling and angry about all the bad things that are happening with the people of God at this time. And he's calling on God, and he's saying, God, why are you allowing this to go on? God, why is this taking place? Why are these problems existing within your people? You could stop this if you wanted to, but it's not happening. Nothing is changing. Why is this continuing? Even though I'm seeking you, I'm calling upon you, it doesn't seem to get better. It doesn't ever seem to really change no matter what we do. And it looks like at times people kind of, they're turning back, but then nothing changes. It seems like we just continue to go further and further down. And he's really upset about this. And this is where he calls upon God. And he really asks a lot of the same questions that people today are still asking of God. God, why don't you seem fair? God, why don't you seem fair? It seems like the people that are doing all the injustices, they continue to prosper, or they, the bad things don't come on them, even though they're doing wrong. And yet your people who are trying to do what's right end up hurting and in more problems and more difficulty. God, why is that? Why don't you seem fair? You ever ask that question? I know I have. I know there's been times in my life I'm like, God, this isn't right. This is not fair. God, why is this happening to me? we're going to see this, and we're going to struggle with this throughout the course of the next few weeks and really understand what Habakkuk is going through this and really pull some principles that can help us even in the midst of this, because sometimes life is tough, and we can realize that God is still good even when life is not. Amen? Verse 1 of Habakkuk chapter 1, God is showing Habakkuk really a vision or a prophecy, and it's a kind of a dooming prophecy. It's very burdensome, if you will. It's kind of just an utterance to Habakkuk about what is to come. Okay, and so that's what verse 1. Let's look at verse 2. Habakkuk chapter 1. How long, O Lord, must I call for help, but you do not listen? Or cry out to you, violence, but you do not save? Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? In today's time, it might be something like this. It might be, God, why is that person that I love so much going through this very tough situation? God, why is my child sick and doesn't seem to get better? God, why can I not seem to get out of this financial struggle that I'm going through? God, why is this happening? God, you could fix this if you wanted to, but it's not getting fixed. It's not getting any better. God, why do I find myself in this? God, I have done everything that you've asked of me. I've been praying for that person that you have for me, but it doesn't seem like it's happening. It doesn't seem like you're bringing anybody my way, and every time I try, it ends in bad. God, what's going on? What's going on? What are you doing? Habakkuk, he just doesn't get it. He doesn't understand because he feels like, God, you could intervene if you wanted to, but it's not happening. It's not happening. You ever said, God, you could fix my life if you wanted to with a snap of your fingers, but that's not happening. Not happening. God, why is that going on? Here's what we have to appreciate in this book of Habakkuk is the just brutal honesty that he goes to God with. It's really just super raw. It's the emotion, it's the heart of this guy, this prophet that's crying out to God because of the hurt and the pain and the injustice that he's seeing and the different things that are taking place. And it's just one of those really raw type of books where you see the heart of this guy and what he's struggling with and what he's going through. Even his very name tells a story. Even the name, it tells my story, if you will. What does it mean? Here's what Habakkuk means. It means to embrace and to wrestle. To embrace and to wrestle. God, I'm going to embrace you. I'm going to hold on to you. I'm going to hold on to these principles, these truths, these things I know that are real. But God, I'm wrestling because what I see doesn't match what I believe. What I see going on in the world today, it doesn't match up with what I know about you and believe about you, because I'm holding on to these truths, these principles, these things I know about you. But God, these things that I'm seeing going on, it doesn't match up, and so I'm struggling, God. I'm having a hard time here, and it's hard to embrace because of these things going on that I'm wrestling with. I'm struggling with. I don't know. He's embracing God, but because he sees all these things, it's a wrestle. You ever been there? There's been times in my life where, the things that have happened to me, the circumstances, the situations that I find myself in are like, God, but why? Why is this going on? God, why is this happening to me? It doesn't seem like this happened to other people like this. Why is this going on? God, I'm being faithful to you. I'm serving you, and yet still these things. God, I'm wrestling with this. I'm struggling with this. Why is this the case? Let me give you this warning. Everybody say, uh-oh. turn to your neighbor and say, uh-oh. Turn to your second favorite neighbor and say, I'm sorry you're my second favorite neighbor, but uh-oh. Let me give you this warning, okay? This is not going to be a typical message, as I mentioned earlier, okay? A lot of the messages that we speak here are what you might call, what many people would call a sitcom sermon. A sitcom sermon. You know what a sitcom is. Maybe you have your favorite sitcom. In my generation, it was, probably Happy Days or something like that. Maybe you're the Friends generation or The Office or whatever. Maybe you've got your favorite sitcom. What is a sitcom sermon? In a sitcom, right, everything starts good and happy and everybody's on an upbeat note, and then there's some kind of a problem, some kind of an issue, right, and then you struggle with that over the course of a few minutes, and then by the end of the 30-minute with commercial sitcom, there's some kind of resolution and you go away feeling good about yourself again, right? A lot of times that's kind of the messages that, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's good. Maybe it would look like this. You're struggling. You love your job and things are going good at your job, but you lose your job. And, we preach a message and things are great and God's got something for you. And then all of a sudden you get a better job and you're at this great, and you just love it. It's way better than what you had. You're making more money than what you had. And you're a single girl and you sit by this really cute single guy in the office. He's got the cube right next to you and it turns out he's the son of the owner. And then you guys get married for the glory of God. And then he inherits this company, right? And you sell it for millions of dollars. And everything's just great. Everything's perfect, That might be something that I share or whatever, and a story that is told, and so things are great, and then you lose your job, things aren't so good, and then resolution, right? And things are good again. And a lot of times that's the way it is. But that's a sitcom. Okay, that's a sitcom sermon. And how many know sitcoms aren't real? Right? And oftentimes in life, it's not sitcom-esque, if you will. A lot of times in life, you lose your job, the job that you love, and you don't get something again right away. Maybe you're believing God and you're praying and you're believing for something, but nothing comes along. And so you continue to pray, and maybe you find something that's, that you can do, but it's not in the area you want to be in, and it's making less money than what you were making, and God's saying you need to be faithful right here for right now, and this is tough, and this is hard, and it doesn't get better, and you don't get promoted, and it's tough, and it's a season of difficulty, and you're praying, you're believing, but it doesn't get better right away. Sometimes life is real like that. Sometimes it can be tough. Maybe you're praying for someone who's sick, and you're believing God, and you're standing on God's word, and you believe that, God, you're going to do something, and something's going to get happen here, and you're going to move, and it doesn't. It doesn't change right away. Maybe you're praying for grandma to get better, and instead grandma dies. Maybe you find yourself in a place where you know somebody who's very close to you, somebody you care about very much, and something tragic happens. And they're no longer with us. That's real life, and that hurts, and that's hard. And how do we deal with those kind of situations? How do we deal with that? Where do we go from there? What is God doing? God, why don't you seem fair? God, I don't understand what's going on. I don't know why I'm having to walk through this. And in the midst of this, sometimes as we're struggling with what's going on because it's real life, you're hurting, you're down, but you're saying, you know what, I'm going to do my best to be around people that can encourage me. And you go to church, and some well-meaning Christian who comes to you and says, well, God is in control, and you just need to let And I don't know why I talk like that, but anyway. And here's the thing, is they may, their theology may not be bad, and their heart is no doubt good and in the right place. But in that moment, it doesn't help. It doesn't bring encouragement. It just makes it look like what I'm doing is not what I ought to be doing. And it hurts. And it makes things worse. And it doesn't look like things, and you're praying that it will, but instead it doesn't look like it gets better. What do we do with that? How do we handle that? God, it's not fair. Things aren't right. And that's how Habakkuk is feeling in this moment. And here's what he says in verse 3. Why do you make me look at injustice? Why do you tolerate wrongdoing? Destruction and violence are before me. There is strife and conflict abounds. Maybe that sounds like your household. Therefore, the law is paralyzed and justice never prevails. And that's where Habakkuk feels right now. That's what he feels like is taking place. And he's saying, God, this just doesn't seem right. God, I don't get this. What are Habakkuk's problems with God? What is it that he's struggling with? Let's look at this. What are Habakkuk's problems? Here they are. Number one, God, you don't seem to really care. You just don't seem to care right now what is happening in my life. Why don't you care? Because it looks like you don't. I don't understand. Why don't you care, God? Second is God, you aren't doing much when you obviously could. It seems like you could do something if you wanted to, but nothing is happening, and you could do something if you wanted to, but you're not. And then he said, what you are doing, the things that you are doing right now, they just don't seem fair. They just don't seem right. If you have a teenager, you've probably heard these words before. That's not fair. But that's not fair, Dad. That's not fair. But how often, even as adults, when we find ourselves in situations and struggles, say, God, this just isn't fair. God, this isn't right. Why is this happening? Why is this going on like this? God, if I were you, I would do it differently. You ever thought that? You ever been like, if I were God, I would do something. How many of you ever thought, if I were God, I would not do it this way? Okay? I have a few of you raise your hand. The rest of you, just don't be honest. Sit there, polish your halos, okay? I'll talk to the real people in the room, okay? Sometimes we go to God and we're like, God, why are you doing this? If I were you, no way would I do it like this. God, this just doesn't seem right. This doesn't seem fair. Let me ask you this question. Think about this. Is it ever okay to question God? Is it ever okay to question God? Think about this. A third of the Psalms are prayers or songs of people that are hurting, that are struggling, and they're like, God, why is this going on? The authors of Job, Lamentations, Jeremiah, they're questioning the things that are happening, and they're expressing their confusion about the different things that they're struggling with and that they're going through. Even Jesus, when he hung on the cross, said, God, why have you forsaken me? He's asking God, why is this going on? Why have you taken your presence away from me? Even Jesus said this. So listen, it's okay to question God. It's okay to say, God, why is this going on? Why is this taking place? Why do I find myself in this situation? Let me illustrate it this way. Okay? In life, in real life, okay? Your story, my story, whatever. We find ourselves going through life, and we come to this point where we have this realization with God. This point where we decide, you know what, I need to make a decision about God. And maybe at that point, whatever it is that's going on, and maybe you've gone to a service or a youth camp, what it was for me, and you're at this place and you're like, I need to make this decision for God. And so you give your heart to God, right? That point on the road, the journey of life, you give your heart to God. And all of a sudden, man, life is just awesome. And things just seem to be, you pray a prayer and God does it, man. It's just, things are great. You're living on the mountaintop and you ask God for a new car, and he comes through, or you pray for that person to come to know God, and God does something awesome, and you take your new car and you go to the mall and you pray for a good parking spot. You get the perfect parking spot. It's just like, wow. And then, everything just seems to be going great. You turn the radio on in that new car, and the song that comes on is just, it's the perfect one, right? You need that. It's great. Everything seems to be going great, right? You're on the mountaintop. And then life happens. And all of a sudden you find that, you know what, I'm not on the mountaintop anymore. I feel like, man, things are just, they're not so good. I feel like I'm starting to go into this valley, this struggle, and why is this so hard, and why is this not happening? Why did they have to say that about me? That wasn't very kind. And you feel like your things are just going back downhill. And you get to this spot, and all of a sudden, you end up putting more into this new car than what you wanted to, and it's more expensive, and now you don't have the money for it. And, you go to the mall, and you can't find a parking spot anywhere, and you turn the radio on, and there's not any good songs on anymore, right? And it's like, this is not good, and it keeps going downhill. And you come to a spot where many call it a crisis of faith. And you get to this spot on the downhill side of the mountain, the backside of the mountain, where it's dark and it's ugly and it doesn't look good and things aren't good in life all of a sudden. And it's just a dark time. And most people, when they find themselves in that place, they think they have two choices. There's two choices. We can either make it look like we're on the mountaintop, and we can act like everything's fine, and we can put on a face and an air, and we can go to church and, oh yes, everything's good, bless the Lord, And again, I'm sorry about that voice. I didn't mean that. So everything's good, it's fine, and you put the happy face on, and in front of everybody, everything seems good. Okay? That's one option. Or the other option is you go back to this spot in time where you made a decision for God, and you said, you know what, God is real and things are going awesome, and I'm going to serve God, I'm going to give my heart to him. And you go back to that point and you said, maybe that wasn't the right decision. Maybe God isn't good. Maybe God isn't real, and maybe I made a bad decision, and maybe I shouldn't have given my heart to God. And so maybe the only other option is maybe I just walk away from God and I go my own way. But what if there was another option? What if there really was another alternative, and it wasn't just I got to fake it or I got to walk away? Maybe we need to come to this part in our life where we look at things and we say, you know what, I'm going to do like what Habakkuk did. I'm going to embrace God while I wrestle with this difficulty. I'm going to embrace God. I'm going to embrace his truth. I'm going to hold on to the things that I know that are true while I'm wrestling with these things that I see that just don't seem right. I'm going to embrace God, but I'm going to wrestle with this struggle, this hardship, this thing that I'm going through that I don't completely understand and I don't get it at all. I'm going to wrestle and I'm going to embrace. Believe it or not, that's an option. It's doing what James, the book of James says when it says, count it all joy in trials and tribulations. Because what I know is those trials, what do? They produce perseverance. And so as I'm going through this trial, I'm clinging on to God, but I'm struggling with this, but I'm counting it all joy. And as I go through this, what I know is, God, you're working perseverance in me, and you're doing something great. And God, I believe that I see the goodness of the God, even though there's tough things going on right now. And what do we see? Maybe we get back up on the side of the mountain, going back up the other direction, right? God, I believe it. Just like Psalm 23 says, yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. Why? Because you are with me. What are we doing in the midst of that? God, we're saying, I'm going to hold on to you. I'm going to embrace the goodness of God, even though it doesn't look good right now. God, even though things are tough right now, God, I'm going to embrace you, but I'm going to wrestle with this struggle. I'm going to wrestle with this thing that's going on. God, I don't understand. I don't get it. I don't even know if I believe that this is you at work. God, I'm going to hold on anyway while I wrestle with this struggle. Here's God's response. Here's God's response. And man, this is so real. And maybe this is where you find yourself, is that you say, God, I'm holding on to you. I'm embracing with everything I got. And here's what Habakkuk hears from God in verse 5. God's response to him is this: look at the nations and watch, and be utterly amazed. Be utterly amazed. For I am going to do something in your days that you would not believe, even if you were told. Even if you were told. Listen, you're not going to believe it. Something's going to happen. You're going to be amazed at this. And so, again, Habakkuk's like, okay, God, what is it that's going to happen? God, what are you going to do? Let's go on to verse 6. He says, I am raising up the Babylonians. Now, let me just stop right there for a second. Listen, the Babylonians, you know who they were? They were the enemy. They were the enemy of God's people. And God says, I'm going to raise up the Babylonians. Here's how great they were. That ruthless and impetuous people who sweep across the whole earth to seize dwellings not their own. They are a feared and dreaded people. They all come intent on violence. And so Habakkuk is saying, are you kidding me? So it's going to go from bad to worse, God? You're raising up these people that are going to come in and take over and cause destruction among the people of God. What in the world? God, I don't understand. Why? Why? This makes no sense. God, this is not fair. God, this can't be right. What do you do when you find yourself in that situation? What do we do? What do we do? Listen, here's what I want you to get. A committed believer can both wrestle with honest questions and embrace a genuine faith in God. You can do both. Let me give you the permission today to do both. It doesn't have to be an either or. It doesn't have to be these are my two options and no more. Listen, you can do both. You can embrace God and say, God, I'm going to serve you. God, I'm going to live for you. And still wrestle with the things that may be going on, to wrestle with the difficulties and the challenges. And God, I don't understand this. I don't get it. God, why? God, this doesn't seem fair. If you're committed to the things of God, here's what you can do. You can embrace God and wrestle with the struggles. This is exactly what Habakkuk did. Let me show you, verse 12. Lord, are you not from everlasting to everlasting? God, you are my God, my Holy One. I'm embracing who he's embracing right here. You will never die. God, I'm embracing you. You, Lord, have appointed them to execute judgment. I don't know. I'm struggling with this. You've appointed our enemies to execute judgment. I'm struggling. You are my rock. I'm clinging. I'm holding on. I'm embracing. You have ordained them to punish. God, I'm struggling with that. Your eyes are too pure to look on evil. God, I'm embracing you. You cannot tolerate wrongdoings. Why then do you tolerate the treacherous? I'm struggling with this. Why are you silent when the wicked swallow up those more righteous than themselves? God, I'm wrestling. You see how he's doing this? You see where he's at in this? He's embracing and he's wrestling because he's struggling. God, why is this happening? Why is this going on? Why am I walking through this? God, my children are running from you. They're not living for you. God, why is this? God, we raised them on your teaching, but yet they're walking away. God, I'm struggling with that. God, I don't understand why I'm having to deal with this medical issue, God, and it doesn't seem like it continues to get better. It seems like it continues to get worse, and I don't understand, and nobody has any answers, and God, I'm calling on you, but it's not getting better yet. God, why? Why is this? What is going on? Or what are you doing? Listen, if you're there right now, let me just tell you this. God understands your pain. God understands your pain probably better than anybody else could ever understand. He gets it. And he welcomes your questions. I would rather have you yell at him than walk away from him. And listen, he would rather that as well. He would rather you come to him and just lay it all bare. And just like Habakkuk did, just really let your heart be raw before God and say, God, this is not right. This is not fair. God, this is not good. He wants you to come to him with those rather than to walk away and say, God, I'm done. There is the option to be able to go to him. Maybe you find yourself in that situation. You've hit a wall. You've come up against this crisis of faith. You're not sure what to do. You're not sure where to go. You're not sure where to turn. You're not even sure if you can go to God with this anymore. The mountain seems too big, the trial too hard, the burden too heavy to bear. Listen, I'm not talking about denying your doubts. Don't deny and just say, it's not happening. Everything's good, even though it's not. No. You have to let your doubts drive you to God. You have to say, God, I'm struggling with this, but I'm bringing this to you. And God, I need some answers. I need some help with this. I need you to show me something. In the book that I told you about that you can buy out there, Hope in the Dark, there's a part in there that I want to read to you that's really powerful. And I think it puts some perspective to what we're talking about here. It says this: what if honestly acknowledging your doubts is the first step toward building a deeper faith? What if embracing your secret questions opens the door for maturing knowledge of God's character? What if drawing closer to God, developing genuine intimacy with him, requires you to bear that which feels unbearable? To hear him through an anonymous utterance, to trust him in the moment of doom, to embrace his strength when you're weak with a burden. What if it takes real pain to experience deep and abiding hope? What if the things that you're struggling, the things that you're going through, only enables you to know God in such a greater way than you could ever imagine? Habakkuk, he embraced and he wrestled. He embraced who he knew God was, and he wrestled with the challenges, the difficulties, the struggles that he found himself in. It reminds me of, in the Old Testament, story of Jacob, who was coming back home from being gone for a long time, and he had really kind of tricked his brother in getting the birthright from him, but now he's coming home years later, and he's got a large following, and all these cattle and herds, and a large family, and all this kind of stuff, and he's coming back to his brother, and his brother knows that he's coming, and people tell him, listen, he's coming to meet you, and he has an army of 400 people. And Jacob's like, oh my goodness, this may not go well. This may not go well at all. I'm concerned, I'm scared about, and so he does some practical things, and he divides up, and he sends his people to a certain place, and he ends up finding himself all alone in camp, all by himself. You ever felt all alone? It's where Jacob at. He just feels like he's all by himself. In the midst of this, he turns to God. It's the middle of the night, and he calls upon God, and all of a sudden there's this angel of the Lord that is before him that's there. And it says that Jacob grabs a hold of this messenger from the Lord, and it says they begin to wrestle. And they wrestle all night long. All night long. Oh, sorry. Just reminded me of the song. So anyway, they're wrestling. They're wrestling through this. And they're wrestling all night long. All night. They're wrestling. And Jacob says something that just blows my mind every time I hear this. The angel of the Lord, the messenger of the Lord says, let go of me. Let me go. And Jacob says, I'm not going to let go until you bless me. Until you do something for me, until something happens, I'm not going to let go. What was he doing? He was embracing what he knew to be right, what he knew to be in God, and he was wrestling at the same time, because he said, I cannot allow this to shake me away from what I know to be right. Here's what we need to understand. Here's what we need to grasp today is, listen, it's okay if we're struggling with something. It's okay if we don't get it all the time, if we're questioning the things of God, and I'm wrestling with this God. But here's what I know is that we can't let go. We have to embrace what we know is good about God. If this was a sitcom sermon, I would tell a great story of, oh, this is what happened, and all of a sudden we're back on the mountaintop, but this is not a sitcom sermon. And this is where it ends. We're struggling. We're wrestling. We're battling. Maybe for you with life right now, it feels like a struggle. It feels like a wrestling match to the end. You don't know how it's going to turn out. Maybe you find yourself right now in that moment, in that place, where you're saying, God, I don't know what to do. I don't know where to turn. Maybe you feel like, you know what, I don't know if I need to continue to live for God any longer, because I just don't know. Listen, I'm going to tell you, there is that other option of wrestling and embracing. I don't know where the story goes. I don't know where it ends, but here's what I do know. We can do that together. We can wrestle while we hold on to what we know is good about God. Amen. I hope you enjoyed the message today. Throughout this series, we're believing God to do incredible things in so many lives, and we know that can happen for you as well. If you would like to connect with us in any way or would like for us to pray with you, you can go to grainvalley.church, and there you can submit a prayer request, or you can connect with us in different ways. Just know that we're praying with you, and we'll take those requests and pray over you and believe God with you to do amazing things. Hope you'll join us again next week for the continuation of this series, and we're believing God for great things in our church and in your life as well. God bless.